Warning: this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Give us 1 hour and we'll help you change the way you think about happiness. Harvesting Happiness with Lisa Cypers Kamen is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Each week, Lisa spotlights diverse trendsetters and change agents who are the greatest contemporary thinkers and doers, devoting their lives to creating a better world in which to live. Your host, Lisa Cypers Kamen, is a widely recognized applied positive psychology expert, author, documentary filmmaker, and lecturer specializing in optimal lifestyle management. Let's get to it. Here's Lisa.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us on today's show, where you will learn about leadership by design, improving ROI through integrity, alignment, and agency. My first guest is Paul Knapper. He leads a management psychology practice. He's also an author. His client list includes Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, universities, and startups. Dr. Paul Knapper has held an advanced fellowship during a 3-year academic appointment at Harvard Medical School. And we're talking about his new book, The Power of Agency, the 7 principles to conquer obstacles, make effective decisions, and create a life on your own terms. Paul, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Let's talk about the definition of agency, because people will say, well, I think I know what that means, but what does it mean in reference to our own lives and self-determination?
It's a great place to start. Agency, as it turns out, is not that familiar to most people. And what it refers to is it's a concept that has been studied by sociologists and psychologists and philosophers for decades, more on the academic side. So if you don't know what it means, don't sweat it. It's fairly new to the average person. But what it means is it's our capacity to make decisions in our lives for ourselves and take our lives then in the desired direction. So it's the capacity to make decisions and then act on those decisions in our lives.
So basically, we're being an agent and representative of our own best interests.
That's exactly right. And for people who are close to the entertainment industry, everyone knows what a sports agent is, or a literary agent, or, an actor's agent, somebody who helps you, right? Somebody who guides you, helps you manage your career, helps negotiate contracts. So it turns out we all have an agent within ourselves that we can activate to help us to advocate for our own selves. And agency gets at that idea. So it's this capacity to make independent, decisions and then act with confidence on those decisions. And so what we write about is there's a lot of things that get in the way of our ability to access that inner agent.
I want to ask a question about that. And when we talk about things that get in the way of our own agencies, are you talking about thoughts and feelings?
We're talking about a lot of things, but yes, thoughts and feelings are, as it turns out, we are, as humans, we're more emotional creatures than we are thinking creatures. So there's a lot of research that's been done over the last 30, 40 years on how we actually think as human beings, how we make decisions in our lives. So there's a lot of new ground to cover for people, I think, to get more familiar with all of that. But, we like to say that in so many respects, each and every one of us is the sum total of all the decisions we make over the course of our lives. And so how we make choices in our lives, which is, again, what agency is all about, becomes that all-defining thing. And how we think, patterns in our thinking, patterns in terms of our emotions, how we feel, how we make sense of our feelings, all of these things affect our level of agency.
And when we talk about thoughts and feelings, although they are very much a part of what makes us up or contributes to our behaviors, they don't always contribute to the best decision making because they are not fact-based.
That's right. And, we as humans, how we generally think and make decisions is through intuition, which is shocking to most people, because most people think, well, I don't think of myself as necessarily a highly intuitive thinker, but in fact, most of the decisions we make are through what's called fast thinking. Fast thinking is more automatic. It's more, again, more intuitive. Which is kind of rule of thumb, just something feels a lot like something else. And so we're kind of off to the races making decisions. For smaller decisions, like, what kind of vegetables should I, buy at the grocery store today? Obviously it's not so consequential. For larger decisions, more important life decisions, the capacity to think more logically for ourselves, to fully use our reasoning skills as people, becomes a lot more important. And what can happen is a lot of people haven't developed that skill, right? They haven't learned how to do the pivot from thinking more intuitively versus, engaging in more of their critical reasoning.
So some of our listeners might think, well, that just sounds a little woo-woo here when we're talking about the intuition, trusting the gut. But the research really backs up what you are saying.
Absolutely. No, the research is clear. We have several chapters in the book that delve into all of this. This is based on the research primarily of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, two very well-known psychologists who did a lot of research on how humans use reason and how they actually make decisions. And so it's based on science. It's based on research. And what we try to do in our book is bring this down to earth so people can make, practical sense of it and actually use these important research findings in their lives each and every day to make better decisions. So
agency plays a huge role in every area of our life, the way we partner, the way we parent, the way we perform at work. Talk a little bit about ways that one can strengthen agency.
Well, you said it, very well. Our level of agency affects every aspect of our lives. It affects the quality of our work, the quality of our relationships. It certainly has a direct bearing on our level of happiness. As it turns out, it feels good to have agency, to use agency, to have access to our agency. You can think about agency as, the sort of pathway to your own personal power and creativity in your life. So when it's blocked, when you feel stuck, you feel adrift, you feel thwarted, it's not a good feeling. And what we found is a lot of people find themselves in that place today. The word that keeps bubbling up is overwhelm. People feel overwhelmed so much more of the time today than ever before. And when you feel overwhelmed for extended periods of time, it by definition raises anxiety levels. And when anxiety level increases, it compromises our capacity to think and reflect. So we have put together 7 principles in our book, boiled it down to the absolute most essential things for people to focus on that help them to regain sort of a calm and centered footing in their lives so that they can better access their thinking skills and make better decisions, and then obviously act with greater confidence and get unstuck and also experience less overwhelm.
Can you share those 7 points?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll run through them kind of briefly. If you want to touch on any of them, we can come back to them.
Yeah, definitely.
The first one, they sound a little wonky. maybe a little because they're sort of science based. The book is, again, it's based on sound science and research. The first principle is we call control stimuli. So this is about, controlling what gets into your brain, which is, being a gatekeeper for yourself in terms of not allowing an excess amount of stimulation to enter your brain. The second principle we call associate selectively. This is about surrounding yourself with people who are encouraging, who are supportive, people who help you learn new things, people who challenge you. The third principle we call move. Move is about taking care of your physical health. It's about ensuring that you engage in an appropriate amount of movement and activity, not necessarily just exercise, but just movement, physical movement in your life, that you eat healthy food, that you rest adequately, and that essentially you are taking care of the physical functioning of your body. The fourth principle, and then those first three, by the way, we call the behavioral principles. They're more about how you behave. And, they involve choices you make about specific behaviors you engage in. The last four principles we call cognitive principles. They involve how you think and how you process emotion. So the fourth one we call position yourself as a learner. This is about understanding better how you learn in your life. Everyone learns differently, and some people learn better through some modes than others. So it's understanding better how you learn. And it's also about how to more actively position yourself to learn each and every day in your life. The fifth principle we call manage your emotions and beliefs.
I'm laughing.
Right. And this is one of the harder ones, as I know you know.
I know.
This, again, it's back to the whole idea we are emotional creatures. How we manage our emotions and our beliefs becomes a really critical determinant to how much agency we have in our lives. So this idea of emotions can't be entirely controlled, but they actually can be managed. And, the way to manage them is first, obviously to identify what I'm feeling, try and get a gauge on why I'm feeling it. And then thirdly, what do I do with it? Do I need to act on it? Do I need to just let it pass and fade away? So this principle essentially focuses on self-awareness. Beliefs are something also that, how we as human beings develop beliefs, why we develop beliefs, what function it serves in our lives, and also how to utilize our beliefs to help us rather than hinder us. Because at certain times, beliefs become self-limiting.
Yes.
Beliefs are meant to be updated as we learn more and grow as humans. A lot of times people don't know that. They don't update their beliefs frequently enough, and consequently they're held back. So that's probably one of the most challenging of the 7 principles. The final 2 principles, the 6th one we call check your intuition. So this gets into how you make use of intuition. We start with what intuition is, what it's not. A lot of people don't understand really what intuition is, right? I mean, a lot of people, like you alluded to earlier, think it's fluffy. It's like, what is it, like akin to astrology? Is it?
Yes.
Like reading my horoscope every day? Well, no, actually, intuition is a very important part of how we think. And if we understand what it is and how to access it and use it in the best ways in our lives, it can really improve the quality of the choices we make. The 7th and final principle we call deliberate, then act. The whole idea of deliberation is to reflect on something and also employ critical thinking skills. So critical thinking skills have been now defined as one of the most important skills of the 21st century. So our ability to use logic and reasoning as we make important choices, decisions that are going to have life-changing effects on ourselves. This is a skill that we absolutely need for the 21st century. So this last final principle of agency goes into great length on how other experts in fields where they're required to make important decisions, how they actually make those decisions and how you can learn from them.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Dr. Paul Knapper. We're talking about his new book, The Power of Agency, the 7 Principles to Conquer Obstacles, Make Effective Decisions, and Create a Life on Your Own Terms. To learn more, please visit powerofagency.com, and on Twitter, you can connect with Paul Knapper at Dr. Paul Knapper. Here comes the break. We'll be right back, and that is a promise. Before we pause, let's talk about how much great food and happiness go hand in hand. Green Chef, one of today's beloved episode sponsors, continues to make my life a whole lot tastier and happier. Green Chef is the first USDA certified organic meal kit company delivering delicious and nutritious, fresh, seasonally sourced hearty chow direct to your front door. Green Chef makes eating well a snap with affordable plans to fit every lifestyle. Whether you follow a low-carbo, keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, or simply balanced meal plan, Green Chef has a healthy menu to satisfy your taste buds. Right now, I'm eating mostly plant-based to help boost my immune system and lower creeping blood pressure. My favorite Green Chef meal this week is Moroccan carrots and rice with shug, sauteed peas and radishes, cashew crema, and pistachios. Oh my gosh, this is a crowd-pleasing winner. I love the no-brainer convenience of Green Chef's pre-measured, portioned, and mostly prepped meals. They've taken the stress and mess out of cooking, giving me more time for fun and relaxation with my family. This makes me extra happy. Here's some other good news. Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh, another favorite show sponsor. This opens up bigger food horizons for our household and yours. Join me on Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. Go to greenchef.com/90HH and use code 90HH to get $90 off, including free shipping. That's greenchef.com/90HH and use code 90HH to get $90 off, including free shipping. Now let's take that break. We'll be right back, and that is a promise.
To learn more about cultivating sustainable well-being at home and the office, visit harvestinghappiness.com and explore Lisa's experiential on-site brain fitness workshops, corporate programming, and speaking engagement services.
And we're back. But before we get back to it, let's talk about the most valued asset in any company, the people we hire. Venture capitalist Jess Lee says companies are about the people. You can't do everything yourself, so you need to gather a team of smart, creative people and empower them. It's about picking your team and throwing out big challenges. Hiring smart and capable talent to help build your company is one of those things you do not want to mess up. You need to hire the right people if you want to take your business to the next level. And that's why I'm proud to partner with Indeed. Indeed.com is the #1 hiring site in the world and will help you find the high impact hire you need, just like they have done for more than 3 million businesses. And Indeed will help you find quality candidates instantly with Indeed's Instant Match. Unlike other sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility, delivering a quality shortlist faster. With Indeed, you only pay for what you need. You can pause your account at any time, and there are no long-term contracts. Indeed searches through millions of resumes in their database to deliver you great candidates instantly. With Instant Match, you see a list of great candidates with zero wait. Who doesn't love instant service and instant gratification? Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. 73% of online job seekers in the U.S. visit Indeed each month, according to ComScore Total Visits. Want your quality shortlist fast? You need Indeed. Right now, our listeners get a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/HH. This is Indeed's best offer available anywhere. Get a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/HH. Indeed.com/HH. Offer valid through March 31st. Terms and conditions apply. Now let's get back to it. And we're back, continuing the conversation with Paul Knapper about leadership by design, improving ROI through integrity, alignment, and agency. Let's get back to the discussion. So, Paul, we're talking about being agent self, like how we can be the best advocate for our own best interests, whether it's for ourselves, our families, or in our businesses, in our companies. Talk a little bit about how a high level of discernment, and I'm going back to the 7th point in this process, which taps into critical thinking, how discernment really is a requirement and how discernment is something that many of us lack. We could use a little strengthening of that emotional muscle.
Absolutely. No, this is a very important point. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot in the book is that, we all are trying to adapt to the demands our environment places on us. So whether we're talking about our family lives, our business lives, whatever we do in our lives, there are demands around us that we are being required to adapt to. And the first order of business is to make sense of those demands. What is occurring around me? Can I define it? Can I define it accurately? And can I then figure out what it's requiring that I do about it? So in business, what that essentially involves is the capacity to define reality and then to make discerning judgments based on what the reality is. So similarly in people's personal lives, making sense of what is happening and what you should do about it becomes a very essential matter of not just survival, but really a matter of how much happiness and fulfillment people have in their lives. And it's become more challenging to make sense of the environment that we all inhabit. What we say in our book is, we're all in over our heads these days.
Yeah,
from
that's true.
from a cognitive standpoint, there's so much information coming at us. It's kind of a cliche right now to say, oh yeah, we live in the information age, but we do. And what it means to live in the information age is that more and more information comes at us every day. And it's our capacity to make sense of that and actually make discerning judgments that defines the quality of our lives, whether it's our personal life, whether it's our work life. So how we do that, and we actually, one of the people we interview in this very last chapter, the chapter on deliberate then act, we interview a judge, a woman who talks about a very difficult decision she had to make, where she struggled to make a discerning judgment. It actually involved a trial that she was presiding over as the judge. And it was a murder trial, and there were all kinds of emotions whipping around, and how she was able to, in the midst of all that pressure, make a discerning judgment. How she went about doing that is something that all of us can learn from, because there are people who make life and death decisions each and every day as part of their work, and we can learn a lot from those people because they have so much on the line that the quality of their judgments matters so greatly that they've learned over time to become better decision makers, to make more discerning judgments. So for all of us, this is a really important thing, and there's a lot in our book about how do we do this? I mean, how do we put this into practice so that we can arrive at more discerning judgments?
So, Paul, talk a little bit about the judge's process of fine-tuning her own agency in her decision-making process, because when you're talking about holding someone's life or death in your hands, in the case perhaps of a murder trial, there must be some very interesting steps that she takes.
Well, first of all, the decision that she needed to make in this case, in this trial, was whether to offer bail as a possibility. So to allow the person to be able to post bail and be released. In most murder trials, that's kind of unheard of. In most murder trials, people are not allowed to go out on bail. In this case, it was very complex because the woman who was being charged was a mother, a single mother with a child at home. And this judge knew that this was going to have profound effects, not just on the woman being charged, but also on a young child. So she basically, how she went about trying to make a discerning judgment is she looked at precedent. How frequently is bail, given to murder trial suspects? Second, she also surveyed the facts of the case. She got herself to a quiet place and really did a deep dive on all the known facts around this case to try to get a gauge on what is the likelihood that this person is guilty of this crime, and how much real look like exist based on the facts. Secondly, she surveyed other judges. She talked to some other judges and got their thoughts and their impressions and their opinions. Third, she gave thought as well to the prevailing environment. It just so happened this trial was occurring during a time in America where it was a real tough on crime, kind of zeitgeist, when, there was a lot, being written in the media about how important it was to be tough on crime. So she knew if she issued this woman bail, there may be a strong backlash. So she kind of got her ducks in a row, and she gave a lot of thought to all the most relevant variables. And she also checked her own emotion, and she tried to prevent herself from being biased. So she was aware, emotionally self-aware of the fact, hey, this woman being charged with murder is also a woman, also a mother, and she understood, the judge understood she could relate very much to that person, but she also didn't want to allow any of those feelings to cloud her judgment. So she kind of weighed all of these factors, and she ended up coming to a decision to grant the woman bail. So the woman was able to be out on bail and take care of her child while she awaited trial. And it turned out in the trial itself, that the woman was acquitted of all charges. And she said she felt a really great sense of relief, the judge, at the end of the trial, because the prosecutor in the case, she said, made it very clear that he thought that justice had been served. And in other words, that this woman was in fact not guilty of having committed that crime. So, but she made a decision, a tough decision that went against prevailing norms. So, she made a discerning judgment that, again, was a tough decision to make because she knew she was going to get a lot of flack for it. But she stuck to her guns. She made the decision. And at the end of the day, she felt really good about the decision she made.
It's interesting because as you're telling the story, the words that pop into my mind is that she went through a collaborative process to get to that agency. In other words, that she outsourced support. She approached it from several different angles, not just, oh, well, what is my gut telling me? The gut played into it after she had done her homework, after she had done the research.
That's right. No, she used multiple levels of intelligence here to both, check on her intuition, but also use critical reasoning skills and really do a deep dive on all of the actual known facts in the case. She reached out to other judges and, trusted advisors to her and got some of their thoughts and their guidance. And she also had a level of emotional awareness where she tried to check her own bias, right? Because was she feeling just a sense of identification with this younger woman who was on trial, and was that guiding her decision in the wrong way because she identified with this person? So she tried to keep all of those things in check. And I think, again, what was so satisfying to her in this one particular case is that at the end of the day, it worked out really well. She was able to make an independent decision on her own to grant bail and allow this woman to take care of her child. And ultimately, the woman was cleared of all charges. So obviously she felt she had made the best decision.
Let's talk a little bit about how this translates to the personal level, because you mentioned several times about the correlation of agency and happiness. And because, the show is Harvesting Happiness, we probably need to kind of circle back to that what we tend to feel most happy when we feel most in charge of ourselves and our lives.
That's exactly it. You hit on that. And that's actually a very profound thought that you just stated there, very, very simply and matter-of-factly. It turns out that when we have access to our agency, it feels really good.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because, we feel more confident and we feel more in charge and we feel more free to act in our lives. So, the whole idea of agency is developing the capacity to think more clearly for yourself and make more independent choices, more independent decisions in your life that take your life in the desired direction, the direction that's most meaningful to you. And at the end of the day, all the research on happiness correlates to this idea of when people feel they're doing something meaningful with their lives, they feel a much greater sense of happiness and fulfillment. So that's really, at the end of the day, the gold standard is, am I doing with my life what feels most meaningful to me? Is it in accord with my values and my interests? Am I having fun? Am I feeling a sense of confidence that I can take action in my life? Because when you do, the chances are you're feeling much happier.
Dr. Paul Knapper, thanks for joining us on the show. To learn more about Dr. Knapper's work, please visit powerofagency.com. The book we were speaking of today is The Power of Agency, the 7 Principles to Conquer Obstacles, Make Effective Decisions, and Create a Life on Your Own Terms. To connect with Dr. Knapper, please do so on Twitter at Dr. Paul Knapper. Paul, thanks for joining me on the show. Please come back and hang out with me. There's so much more to talk about.
A terrific start to the discussion. And thanks again. You asked great questions. Really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks. Let's take that quick pause. We'll be right back.
Did you know that happiness is actually good for your health? Happy people live longer, are more productive, and make better partners, parents, and professionals. Connect with us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and follow Lisa on Twitter at Lisa Kamen for a daily dose of inspiration.
We're back, continuing the conversation about leadership by design, improving ROI through integrity, alignment, and agency. My next guest is Philippe Bouissou. He has spent 3 decades in Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur, CEO, venture capitalist, and management consultant. He is co-founder and managing partner of Blue Dot Partners, LLC, a management consulting firm focused on top-line revenue acceleration for companies or business units with revenues between 10 million and 1 billion. We might be a little bit lower scale over here at Harvesting Happiness, Philippe, but nonetheless, aligning the dots is something that we can all use and take away with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. It is a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
I feel the same way. I feel that anytime we can highlight the good that people are doing to make this world a better place, we're all the better off for it. Let's talk a little bit about aligning the dots, the new paradigm to grow any business. Obviously, your target market is a higher revenue market, but the theories apply to almost everything. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that is correct. I think that the idea is to find a new solution to a problem that any entrepreneur, any business leader, any CEO, any board member, any investor is facing, which is, what do I need to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow the business faster? And growth is really critical because I believe that it's the only way to generate real and sustainable shareholder value. In fact, I actually don't know any other way. So growth is a matter of survival. And if your business is not growing faster than your market, then your competition is, and you're losing market share and you're on a path to become irrelevant. So you're absolutely right that the concept of how to fix that problem, how to address that challenge, applies to just an entrepreneur with an idea trying to figure out what to do, all the way to businesses that have hundreds or billions of dollars in revenue. But it's the same concept. The only difference is that for a large business, you can measure things, you can put numbers and use analytics. For smaller business, you can't because there's not enough data to deal with.
Well, when we talk about growth and how the philosophy of growth relates not just to happiness, but fiscal growth, that without being in that state of dynamic change, I would argue, and I think you probably agree, that happiness or sustainable well-being or market share, being satisfied with one's market share is impossible. So it is that dynamic state that is essential in order for happiness to occur.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. In fact, life itself is not static. The universe is actually growing, it's expanding, and things are changing all the time. In fact, we as human beings are in a transition state where we're an unstable, set of molecules, and we are moving to a different state, which is death and after death. And so I think that the notion of things being static just doesn't exist. I mean, the world is changing all the time. On the business and personal side, you have to adapt. And when I talk about and when I think about growth, it's more of an adaptation to that dynamics, to that change, more than just a relative number that has to go up, if you will.
So when we talk about aligning the dots and the concept of growth in any marketplace or in one's life, what are some of the tools that we can apply to the process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the big insight and really the secret that is revealed by this book and by this concept is the notion that a business cannot achieve its growth potential if it is not fundamentally aligned with its target market. And then people understand that intuitively. Then the next question is, well, what does that really mean? What does aligning my business or a business with its target market, what does that mean? And the key element of the book is that there are really 4 independent axes of alignment between any business and its target market. And let me describe them very briefly. The first one is that the pain of the customer and the claim that the business is making to address that pain, those 2 things have to be aligned. So if you come to me, Lisa, and you say, well, I have a headache, and I show you a stomachache pill, well, your pain and my claim are not aligned. You will never buy my pill.
Yeah.
The second axis of alignment is that the message, which is really the way the claim is expressed, and the perception have to be aligned. So imagine I have a pill for your headache. It costs 99 cents. Your headache will be gone in 10 minutes. And I describe it to you in a language that you don't speak. Then you don't understand what I'm talking about, and you will never buy the pill, even though it's the perfect product for you. You just don't understand what I have, what I'm saying. That's the second axis. The third one is the way customers want to acquire and buy the product or the service. And the way that product or service is sold in the marketplace have to be aligned. So if I say, Lisa, I have your pill, but you have to fly here to the Bay Area, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm here in LA. Why can't I just walk to the pharmacy and buy your pill? So that's the third axis. And then the fourth axis is actually my favorite one. I actually stole it out of the Apple playbook. So I had the good fortune to spend 3 years at Apple. And during the last one, I worked directly for Steve Jobs. And yes, that is how I lost my hair, in case you wonder. But there is one key lesson that I learned from Steve. And it took me a while to understand this, but it's a very profound idea. I came to the realization after working at Apple that there is only one single business on this planet. There is one business on this planet. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight. When you buy a product, you have a certain delight expectation. And as you consume that product or that service, that expectation has to be met. There cannot be a misalignment between what you expect and what is delivered to you. And that's the fourth axis of alignment. So the 4 universal axes of alignment are the pain and the claim have to be aligned, the perception and the message have to be aligned, the purchase and the sale have to be aligned, and the expected delight and the offering have to be aligned. And if you align your business along those 4 independent axes, you will grow that business as much as possible within the market that the business is targeting.
That fourth axis puts a smile on my face and in my heart, because I think at the end of the day, as human beings, we crave not so much happiness. Yes, we all want to be happy, but it's really the absence of the suffering that we really are after. So anything to make life a little bit less hard, more bearable, I think is what we're seeking.
Yeah, and that's what people expect. And when that doesn't happen, when there's a misalignment, then they suffer and there's hardship, and that's difficult.
And this is counterintuitive, right? Because this is sort of flies in the face of everything that we learn in textbooks in business schools about the way business should be done.
That's right. Yes. And I think that, the reason I wrote the book is to really open people's eyes on the notion that there is a new way to think about the challenge of growing. And the traditional methods, and I've been on 20 boards, I served on 20 boards, and it's very tempting and easy to say, well, we're not growing fast enough because the sales team is not doing its job. It's very easy to pin the issue on sales. And when that doesn't work, it's easy to pin the issue on marketing, saying, well, we're not selling enough because we don't have the right leads. And then the marketing complains that the product is not exactly, what the customer wants. So you blame it on product. And then the product guy comes and says, well, I built what I thought would be the coolest product on the planet. Nobody told me what to do. And it's all this nonsense, that really doesn't address the fundamental question on what is it that we need to do. Now, if you look at the problem through the four lenses that I described, the four axes, then suddenly it's not about marketing, it's not about sales, it's about those four alignments. And you look at it very, very differently. And by looking at it differently, you can now solve the problem in a very effective way.
Talk a little bit about your background beyond your 3 years at Apple, because I think the story is very interesting as to how you got here.
Yeah, I came to Silicon. I'm French, I'm European, was born and raised in Europe, moved a lot in Europe because my dad was in the military. But I spent 30 years here in Silicon Valley. I've always been fascinated by technology and software and computers. And the only place, in my opinion, to be about this is here in the Valley. I am really an entrepreneur at heart. I think having ideas is great, but I think transforming those ideas into a business, into something tangible and real is a lot more interesting. And what I realized is that journey is really, really hard. It is very hard to build a successful business. It is not glamorous. There is a lot of ups and downs, a lot of disappointments. You have to have a very high level of belief and conviction and tenacity. And it's this journey that I'm fascinated with. So I studied businesses. Some of them were very successful. Others were miserable failures, which is the one that allowed me to learn. And, I served on 20 boards. I was a venture capitalist in two early stage firms. I invested about $43 million and generated double-digit returns. And I really love to help entrepreneurs. I would take any entrepreneur. Somebody wants to start an ice cream truck, in LA, I'd be happy to try to help. I think that I want to support and give back. I've been very lucky. I've had, great mentors, and I learned a lot. And I just, want to support any entrepreneur because I think it's a fascinating journey. And it's a journey that never stops. And it's a journey that failure is really the way you can move things forward and change and adapt. And the other thing is that it's unpredictable. So I have a PhD in nonlinear physics in chaos theory. And one of the things that chaos theory tells you is that you cannot predict. In fact, you can prove that you cannot predict the outcome of a nonlinear system under the right conditions. And the weather system is a good example of that. And the equity market is another example. And one thing I know is that you can start a journey of entrepreneurship with the best intention, with a clear idea, good alignment, and then the market is changing and dynamics, and you have to adapt, and you cannot predict. I cannot look at an entrepreneur in the eye and say, yeah, you'll be successful or you won't be successful. I have no idea. And that's because, everything is dynamic. Everything is changing, back to the earlier point we talked about.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about chaos theory in your education and about helping entrepreneurs. And I want to just circle back to the theme of this show and what we've been doing here. This show has been on the air for 10 going on 11 years. And when we first started the show, people said to me, you're doing a show about what? Even though positive psychology was very much, a la mode at the time, everybody was researching and writing about it. But to create a brand that is focused on happiness, for example, even though it's probably one of the most prized emotions that a human can experience, was met with skepticism. So, when we use your example and your theory or philosophy here, being counterintuitive is often what is required, to be following your own intuition, to kind of go quietly within and talking about the 4 basic coordinates that you speak of, right? How do we serve the need of the consumer? Sorry, go ahead. I'm going to be quiet.
No, I think you're making a really good point. I think that the counterintuitiveness of approach is really critical. In fact, if you study the most amazing physicists and why they made progress and why we made so much progress, you will find out that they came up with concepts that sounded really crazy and totally counterintuitive. I mean, Einstein is probably the best example.
Oh, yeah.
On the first and the second theory of relativity. And it's a very, very difficult, very counterintuitive. When you think about the particle being at 2 different places at the same time, you say, well, how is that possible? Anyway, it turns out that that's the way the world actually works. And so you're right. It's like coming with a whole new perspective. And I'm hoping that this book will bring that new perspective that people didn't have before. And at the same time, it's very common sense. It's a very pragmatic book. It's not about theory. There's 20 case studies. It's a very actionable book.
Philippe, let's jump off for a break. And when we come back, we'll continue the conversation about your book, Aligning the Dots, the New Paradigm to Grow Any Business. My guest that we're speaking with today is Philippe Bouissou. To learn more about Philippe's work and the book, please go to aligningthedots.com. Once again, that's aligningthedots.com. And you may find him on Twitter at PH.Bouissou, and that's Bouissou. Here comes the pause. We'll be right back, and that is a guarantee.
Who says money can't buy happiness? Whether you are a skeptic or seeker, check out Lisa's new book. Are we happy yet? 8 Keys to Unlocking a Joyful Life. A boot camp manual for greater emotional fitness is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, IndieBound, and HarvestingHappiness.com. Here's a truth bomb. Emotions are contagious, and happiness is a universally desired state. But we tend to forget that we all have the freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable each day, regardless of external circumstances. Explore the journey of human happiness, how to find it and keep it, with Lisa's documentary film, H Factor. Where is your heart? Visit harvestinghappiness.com to learn more.
We're back talking with Philippe Bouissou about leadership by design, improving ROI with integrity, alignment, and agency. Let's get back to the conversation. Philippe, talk a little bit about the accumulation of 30 years experience and how you put this book together as case studies to serve not only larger companies, but sort of people like me and our listeners, maybe solopreneur, smaller entrepreneur, or a mompreneur seeking to realize some vision or dream.
Yeah, I think that the 4 alignments that we talked about earlier are really applied to any business. And one of the key takeaway of the book is that it's a very universal notion. So I can take a cafe on the left bank in Paris, or I can take a small company in LA, or I can take a large company. It doesn't really matter how large the company is, what the company does, where it's located, what types of customers it actually serves. The 4 alignment principle applies. You have to align your business along those 4 axes. And as I pointed out earlier, is that the difference between a large business and a small business is that in the case of a large business, you can actually measure the coefficient of alignment from 0 to 100% because you have enough customer, you have enough data. In a small business or just a concept, you cannot measure it, but you really have to think about the 4 alignments, because if you are not aligning the business from the very early phases of that business, then the business will not grow as quickly and as fast as it could.
So really, we're called to use our vision. It's one thing to say, I want to start a business. Okay. Maybe you have a product or a widget in mind. Okay. But without sort of a technicolor vision of what we want to do with that product or the good that we can affect in the world with that product, we're less likely to succeed.
That's correct. Now, having said that, if you ask yourself about the 4 alignments, that will actually help crystallize what the business actually is. Because if you think about it, you said, okay, I'm going to I have this widget idea in my head. The first question is, well, what pain are you solving? Well, if you can't really crisply answer that question, then you need to think about, maybe the idea is not that great. Maybe there is no pain. It's just a vitamin kind of approach. Maybe there is not enough people who have the pain, so the market size is too small. But if you really, I would encourage anybody who listens and who wants to grow or to start a business to run the business through the 4 axes, and that will answer and unearth a lot of questions, and it will help the entrepreneur really better define and crystallize, the business.
And at this point, I think that we are in a laboratory that is pregnant with possibility for a whole tribe of new businesses to come to the fore. I mean, the world has been upended by the last year. And in that chaos, when you talk about chaos theory, right, there is the opportunity for so much explosive growth.
That's correct. I think any change in the marketplace is an invitation for entrepreneurship and new ideas and new concepts and a redefinition of the way people do business or live their lives. And so, those difficult moments like the pandemic is a blessing and a curse, obviously a curse because it's a terrible thing. But the blessing, I think, or the positive side of it, if you want to look at this way, is that it's all those opportunities that is bringing and the realization that, yes, I can actually conduct my business differently. I don't have to be on a plane and meet people all the time, and really forces people to change. And I think that's going to be a positive dividend when we look back, on that period of time a few years from now.
Do you think that the last year has forced the business world to become more humanistic?
I don't know. I'm certainly hoping for it. And the reason I'm hesitating is because on one level, the suffering, the realization that we're all equal in front of that disease and that terrible virus, makes us more human. On another level, because we're using Zoom and we are further apart physically, that makes things more difficult. I don't know, but I sure hope that it will.
I'm hopeful as well. I mean, I'm hopeful that there's a place for soul in the business world. Mm-hmm. For me, that's what I'm sensing, and also the ability to reevaluate the way we do business, the way we show up. Some of those funny commercials with the businessman or woman who's got, the business attire on from the waist up and from the waist down, it's sweats, and then the background is complete chaos.
Right. No, that's very true. That's very true.
It's reflective of our existence these days.
Yeah. And I think you're touching upon an important point. Those 4 alignments that I described, which is really the alignment between the business and its target market. There is actually a 5th dimension. There's actually a 5th alignment, which is really, really important. And the last chapter of the book is talking about that, which is the internal alignment. So if the team behind the company is not aligned, meaning that they have a common sense of purpose, they have a sense of what the objectives are, they have a sense on how the execution will happen. If that team is not aligned, then the execution of the 4 alignments will not happen and the business will not grow. Yeah. So I'm hoping that I do not believe that a company can be sustained if it doesn't have a real and honest and authentic purpose. So it's possible that this crisis we are living now will make people, take a pause and say, okay, well, why are we really doing this? What's the purpose of this business? Why am I doing this? And to the extent that they can come with a good answer to that question, that will really help on the internal alignment. And without that, the company is not going to grow as fast. They won't execute the external alignment.
We're nearly out of time, and I wanted to touch upon the delightfulness journey, which is, towards the last quarter of the book. You write about a 6-step process, and I really urge our listeners to get a hold of the book and become more familiar with these 4 axes. But you talk about discovery, usage, maintenance, support, upgrade, and disposal. And this is the 6-step delightfulness journey. And I think this is really relevant because if we're not creating delight in the products that we make, whatever that might be, the widget, the process, whatever it is, we are falling short.
Yes, and the 6-step process is really the process by which anyone would interact with a product or a service. And in some businesses, those steps are more or less important. So, for example, disposal, if I sell a dangerous chemical component, the disposal of that component is critical. If I sell a service where I give advice, well, the disposal is less of a big deal because if a customer is not delighted, he or she will go somewhere else. And the transition from my business to this other business, the disposal of my business is not going to be an issue. It's just a simple process. Oh. But those 6 steps are universal. They apply to any business as well. And that's describe the interaction between the customer and the business and the product or the service.
At your website, and that website, I'm going to give it again, is aligningsthedots.com, you offer a quiz. There is a free report that will show you your business alignment score. And I think that's pretty cool. So I want to offer that to our listeners. And I think this process is so interesting because it scales in all directions. And I thank you for writing the book. And it's quite a lovely book inside as well. To learn more about the work of Philippe Bouissou, please visit that website again, aligningsthedots.com. On Twitter, that handle is at @PHBouissou, and that's BOUISSOU. Philippe, thanks for joining me on the show. Please come back and share more.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It was a pleasure, and I wish you the best. And thank you again for having me on your great show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Have a great day and stay safe. Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen and my guests, Paul Knapper and Philippe Bouissou, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Go out and rock your day.
Keep harvesting your own happiness anytime and anywhere from the comfort of wherever you are. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes via our free app or from our libraries at toginet.com, iTunes, Google Play, and other fine podcast platforms. To learn more about Lisa's global consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Spread more joy by liking us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and following Lisa on Twitter at Lisa Kamen. Harvesting Happiness is produced in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU Radio Malibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.